the keys are to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Got to talk about the 49ers injury fallout and Kendrick Bourne coming back to San Francisco in what is not exactly a surprise move, but the fact that he took time to wait, it kind of made me think that maybe there was a little bit more to the 49ers injury with Jauan Jennings, but it doesn't seem like that is the case. And we're going to get into all that because there's so many injury updates that we needed to go over from the game on Sunday. When you look at George Kittle and Jauan Jennings, those are the two that are definitely highlighted. But just like always, you get to Monday and all of a sudden there's some sneaky other injuries that pop up and other guys start dealing with some things as well as the adrenaline wears off and all of a sudden you wake up in the morning and something doesn't feel right, and you go in for treatment after that. So there is a lot to be said for the injury concerns with the 49ers, and unfortunately, they kind of dodged a couple of bullets as well. We saw Fred Warner stay down. He ended up coming back in the game and playing like Fred does. We seen Trent Williams stay down. Now, he ended up getting up and being able to walk off under his own power as well, and so the 49ers definitely can't afford to have injuries. They don't have the kind of depth to be able to overcome, certain injuries. But we did see some of the depth step up. George Kittle had a couple of guys step up in his absence and do the best they possibly could. And because of George Kittle's injury, there could be fallout as far as what the 49ers do about a third tight end. So that's what we're going to talk about in this episode. The injury fallout, what it means of this 49ers roster. Then we're going to talk about Kendrick Bourne and his return to San Francisco and the effect that he could have on this 49ers football team. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. And of course, if you're going to bet, use FanDuel. Right now, the San Francisco 49ers are favored to beat the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans by 4.5 points. The 49ers favored by less than a touchdown, but more than a field goal, kind of where I expected it to be, especially with some of the news on the injuries. The over-under for this game, 40.5, and the under worked out very well. If you bet the under last week, only 2 games went over. So it was something that benefited everyone, some of the sloppy play, lack of execution, because not very many people play in the preseason. It was a good time to bet on the under. So if you're going to bet with FanDuel, the title sponsor of 49ers Cutback. So let's get into these injuries. And right off the bat, it starts with George Kittle. And the reason it starts with George Kittle is because it's the most significant injury of the bunch. Now, if you would have told me that his injury was going to be more significant than Jauan Jennings, it would have surprised me. Now, we don't know the full extent of Jauan Jennings, and I'll talk about that in a second. But George Kittle, according to Kyle Shanahan, is going to be sidelined a few weeks. Now, Rappaport is suggesting that it could be 3 to 5 weeks. And that would definitely put George Kittle in a situation where he could end up going on the IR. Of course, IR designation, that means 4 weeks that George Kittle would miss. He would miss the divisional matchups against Arizona. He'd miss the divisional matchup against the Los Angeles Rams. Those are 2 big football games for the 49ers in week 3 and 5, respectively. So this is a big decision for the 49ers. Now, if they believe that George Kittle is going to come back in 3 weeks, they don't need to put him on the IR, potentially, right? You let this thing play out. That way he's ready to go when they play the Rams. Now, that would be a short week. I don't know if you could expect him to be back for that football game, but if you put him on IR, he won't be. So this is going to be a decision the 49ers are not going to take lightly, but I don't know exactly when they're going to make that decision because they do need roster spots to be able to facilitate putting out the best possible 53-man roster. I do think they're going to hold out a little bit because you already are going to have to create a roster spot in 2 weeks for Demarcus Robinson. So you've got some things happening. Malik Mustafa, you have to create a roster spot. There's going to be roster movement. But this one is a little bit frustrating because, George Kittle is so important to this football team. And not only can he catch the ball the way he does and be a all-pro tight end, but he also blocks, better than any tight end in the league. And so when you don't have that weapon, it changes the offense entirely. So this was a significant injury, and I think everyone felt the effects. You saw the first drive, 49ers were clicking on all cylinders. George Kittle didn't make too many catches, but he was still highly effective, and a lot of his effectiveness is making it easier for other players. So his dynamic is going to be missing over the next few weeks, whether it's the Saints or Cardinals. It's definitely going to be missed. And these are games the 49ers need to win, get off to that fast start, and prepare themselves for that middle stretch when you start playing the Rams and the Bucks and some of those teams that are going to be tops of the divisions. You've got to make sure you win them. They're 1-0 in the division. They need to end up, 2-1, 3-0 in this division over the next several weeks. So this one really hurt. And now it's going to be on the backup guys. It's going to be on Luke Farrell to be able to play really well as tight end number 2, to block in the absence of George Kittle. And it's going to be on Jake Tunges. And, he's a hero in this game against Seattle. He made a big-time play. And so they're going to need to count on him to make some key receptions, because even though Luke Farrell is a solid tight end, he's not exactly a dynamic pass catcher. He'll catch a ball here and there. He's got good hands. He's going to make the catch. He's just not going to get very many yardage after that. Jake Tunges is a little bit better in that category. Now, we haven't seen him be able to get a lot of yak yardage, right? He's not a yak monster like George Kittle, but he can be a little bit more effective. He's got a little bit more shake in his route running. He's got some pretty good hands. He can press a linebacker up the seam and put a little bit of pressure in a two-eye safety look. So there's some things you definitely like about Tunges. Now, the question is going to be, what do you do at third tight end? It could be as simple as you just let George Kittle sit on your roster the way it is, and you bring up Braden Willis from the practice squad, and you just say, okay, these are our 3 guys. We feel comfortable with Farrell and Tunges, and Braden Willis can help on special teams, and if we need a third tight end, he could do it. They could also say, instead of doing that, we've got Farrell, we've got Tunges. In case of an injury, we've got Kyle Juszczyk. So you could still go that direction. So I don't think there needs to be a big move for the 49ers at tight end. We know that George Kittle missing games, unfortunately, is inevitable. It's unfortunate that it's going to be more than just a couple of games, which is usually what happens with George Kittle. He has something that gets nicked up because he plays so difficult, and the war of attrition kind of wears on him. But in this case, it's going to have to be those 2 guys that get it done. They could also bring back Ross Dwelley, sign him to the practice squad, elevate him. So we'll see what happens as this week progresses. But right now, the news is George Kittle is going to be out. It could be 3 to 5 weeks. And like Ian Rappaport said, it could end up being that he goes on the IR. And Kyle Shanahan said, if when it comes to IR, when they tell you it's a few weeks, it's always a possibility. I mean, in order for it to do that, it's got to be a 4-week injury. So I don't know if we decided on that yet. So this is going to be a big decision that the 49ers are going to have to decide over the next few weeks. Now, when it comes to Jauan Jennings is still being evaluated. So the good news is for Jauan Jennings, the MRI showed no issues. But the reason that you got to hit the pause button on knowing for sure that he's going to be back and ready to go versus the New Orleans Saints is Deebo Samuel had a shoulder injury and he had an MRI and it showed nothing. And the shoulder was still bothering him. And when he had a CT scan, it did show the injury. So there is still an off chance that Jauan Jennings is hurt beyond what they know right now. He's still being evaluated. If that CT scan comes back negative, there is a chance that he could go week 2. Shanahan did confirm that Jauan Jennings has a chance to play in week 2 against the New Orleans Saints. So that is great news for the 49ers because this wide receiver room, even though, it's kind of got some guys, it's also a little bit thin. We didn't get anything out of Russell Gage in this game. We didn't get anything out of Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And I think with Scantling, for sure, he hasn't been around long enough right, to kind of get involved in this offense. And so we'll see what happens. They could also, the signing of Kendrick Bourne could mean that there's a corresponding move coming in that wide receiver room. We don't know. Jordan Watkins is also getting close to coming back from his ankle injury. He started practicing last week. 49ers listed him as doubtful, and he was inactive for the game. So there's going to be question marks about this wide receiver room. But when you look at the 49ers wide receiver room, it got a little bit better. And the reason it got a little bit better is because they're going to be signing Kendrick Bourne. And we're going to talk more about that in a second. But when you look at it, it was, super thin. So you have on the active roster, Jauan Jennings, who's dealing with a shoulder injury, Ricky Pearsall, who had just a phenomenal game, 4 catches, 108 yards, really did a great job. Marquez Valdes-Scantling did nothing as far as catching the football. Now, he did run guys off vertical on a couple of routes, but that was it. Sky Moore did nothing when it came to the offensive side of the football. He had a couple pretty good punt returns, and that's great. And hopefully he's going to end up breaking one here or there and making a big play. But Russell Gage came up from the practice squad. You could do that again, or you could have Kendrick Bourne just, play in that place and not elevate Russell Gage, which you might not be able to elevate Russell Gage, because if Brock Purdy, who showed up on the injury list, is not able to go, you're going to have to go with Mac Jones with the starter, and more than likely, you're going to have to elevate your quarterback and make sure that he's capable of going there. So the fact that you have a quarterback on the practice squad for the 49ers could be huge, because you might need him from that practice squad. And that's why you make sure you always have somebody capable to go. And Adrian Martinez hasn't been in San Francisco very long. So it's a very interesting time for the 49ers. Now, they do have plenty of wide receivers on the practice squad. Robbie Chosen, Junior Bergen, the young rookie, Malik Turner, and Russell Gage, who was elevated for this game. They could still elevate Russell Gage 2 more times, but I thought it was a very interesting, significant time to sign Kendrick Bourne, because I do think they need him. And when you look at the Kendrick Bourne deal, the 49ers are reuniting with Kendrick Bourne. Kendrick Bourne announced it on his social media. And Bourne is coming back to the 49ers on a 1-year deal with a max value of $5 million. So we don't know the details of the contract right now. But what we do know is the 49ers must have outbid the Washington Commanders, because Kendrick Bourne decided, after visiting Santa Clara on Monday of last week, visiting the Commanders on Tuesday, by Wednesday he decided that he was going to have to wait until after this week was up. And we know that the framework of the contracts for both the 49ers and the Commanders were in place. So something wasn't exactly working for Kendrick Bourne. And I don't know exactly what that was. But what I do know is, after this game, there was concern about Jauan Jennings. And I'm sure some of the concern was even the fact that Russell Gage and Marquez Valdes-Scantling weren't as involved in the 49ers passing attack as I'm sure the 49ers were hoping. I think it's a little bit more comfortable with Valdes-Scantling and what he could do, because he's still fast, he's still tall, and he hasn't been around very long. But Russell Gage really had no influence in this game at all. And the 49ers need production, especially if Jauan Jennings ends up not being capable of going. Now, if Jauan can go, you still got him and Ricky Pearsall as 1 and 2. But now you have a formidable third option in Kendrick Bourne. And I will say this, Kendrick Bourne is going to be a more effective blocker than Russell Gage. He's also a guy that fits within the system a little bit better. Now, one of the concerns for Kendrick Bourne is going to be how comfortable he gets with Brock Purdy and Mac Jones. And I have to throw Mac Jones in there now with the concerns about Brock Purdy. And we'll talk about his injuries in a second. That there is a possibility that Kendrick Bourne plays with these guys, but how comfortable are they with him? Because they have been throwing to Russell Gage all offseason. And in fact, Russell Gage was part of the 49ers practice squad in 2024. So Brock Purdy has a ton of chemistry with him. So it is something to pay attention to. Now, it is easier when you already know the scheme, you already know the terminology. It's a lot easier to plug and play. And Kendrick Bourne is going to practice with the 49ers on Wednesday. He's already in San Francisco. He's already been a part of the meeting. He is under contract with the 49ers. Now, I don't know what the corresponding move is because that has to happen with the league office. That will get announced at some point. But Bourne is going to be on the active 53-man roster. So you have Jauan Jennings, Ricky Pearsall, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Kendrick Bourne, Sky Moore. That's 5 wide receivers. That is enough to go into the game. You don't even have to elevate Russell Gage, which they might not do because they're probably going to have to elevate a tight end and a quarterback. Last week, they elevated linebacker for special teams reasons in Curtis Robinson, and they elevated, going blank on who they elevated in this game because they ended up playing him too. Russell Gage. So that's who it was. Those were the 2 guys that they did. Russell Gage, the foregone conclusion. Curtis Robinson, a little bit more of a surprise, but I don't think they could go the same direction. So we'll see. I know you can't have your quarterback. You don't have to use him as one of the elevations. He can just be available. Are you going to go into this game with 2 quarterbacks? That's another question. Do they want to sign somebody else? I think there's a lot that's going to have to be found out this week because here it is. Brock Purdy is dealing with a toe and a shoulder injury. Now, Kyle Shanahan said the toe injury is more concerning than the shoulder injury. Both left body injuries, left toe or left foot. There's an injury on the toe and left shoulder, non-throwing shoulder. So that is good sign for Brock Purdy when it comes to shoulder. When it comes to foot, though, those are some concerns depending on what the injury ultimately is. Now, Kyle Shanahan did say he's day-to-day. That's good. But is he going to have practice, this week? Is he going to be able to practice? If he doesn't, how exactly does he get chemistry with the new wide receiver, Kendrick Bourne? That might be difficult to do. That might make it harder for Brock Purdy to be able to find the chemistry with Kendrick Bourne. Now, Brock can trust players really fast because if they are good at getting from point A to point B, then he can still throw with anticipation. But remember that throw he made to Ricky Pearsall on that opening drive that Greg Olsen absolutely gushed about because of the elite timing and the way he threw it before Pearsall even got out of his break or got his head around. That is hard to do if you don't trust the receiver, number one, and you don't have the requisite chemistry with them. So even though I do believe that quarterbacks can get a instant chemistry and they can find these receivers because everything's predicated on timing in Kyle Shanahan's offense, there is something to getting to know those wide receivers' speed, where they're going to be, and the trust factor that they're going to make the play when they're supposed to. So that's going to make it a little bit more interesting as well. Kendrick Bourne may be available to play, but will Brock Purdy have any practice time to be able to kind of build a little bit of a rapport with him during the week to prepare for the Saints? And I think everyone wasn't expecting for Brock Purdy to show up on the injury list. Now, one thing I can say about Brock is the guy has been known to play through injuries before. All you have to do is go back and look at his rookie season. He gets hurt, he injures his ribs, and he goes into the Thursday night game against the Seattle Seahawks, and he shows up and he shows out. I mean, he finishes the game with the scramble where he slides and he's holding the ball out, and just that intelligent play from Brock Purdy that we all just loved because it showed, that he had that ability, that fire, the scrambling ability, but also the intelligence to know where the marker was and what he had to do to make sure he got the first down. So I know that Brock Purdy is extremely tough. So if he can go, he's going to go. I will say this. I do feel comfortable that if Brock Purdy does not play in this game, that Mac Jones has the necessary skills and ability and enough of a grip on this 49ers offense that the 49ers will be able to win the game. He does give them the ability to win the game. That's ultimately what you want your backup to do. It might not blow them out, but he has the requisite skills to go out there and deliver the football on time and find the players that he needs to find. Mac Jones is capable. That's ultimately what you're looking for, a capable backup, and the 49ers got it. So that's the good news. The bad news is Brock Purdy is nicked up, and it's going to be a week to watch to see what happens. Now, if he goes out there and practices on Wednesday or Thursday, I think we feel more comfortable with Brock Purdy. But this is going to be kind of a wait and see approach. And his offensive line, there's another wait and see approach. I wasn't expecting this. So we saw Trent Williams go down, and he was slow to get up, and that's not the concern. We thought it was going to be the concern, but that's not the concern. We saw Dominic Puni stay down, miss a play, come back, grabbing his knee. Nope, that's not the injury concern either. The injury concern is Ben Bartch. This guy, unfortunately, just can't stay healthy. Ben Bartch has a mild sprain of his knee. Now, the good news is, Kyle Shanahan said, this is a mild knee sprain. But this is one of those things that just makes people nervous because Ben Bartch in his career has not been able to stay healthy. He couldn't stay healthy in Jacksonville. That's how he lost his starting job. Got a starting job last year when Aaron Banks got hurt. Made it through 1.5 games. And now he's in a situation where he's dealing with the mild knee sprain. Now, I fully expect for Ben Bartch to be able to work through it, being day-to-day, and to play in the game on Sunday versus the Saints. It's just a little bit of a nerve-wracking situation because you have a starting guard who already has injured his elbow, after coming back from an injury to his knee already. So you are having a guy that's dealt with injuries pretty much the entire offseason. Missed some of training camp. From that, he missed, time with the elbow in training camp once he did come back. Now he's got a big elbow brace, and now it's a mild knee sprain. So hopefully he can play through it, and hopefully this is just a little hiccup. But it is a little bit concerning considering how the players played. Now, Ben Bartch was effective in this game. I mean, he graded out really well with PFF, and you know how it is with PFF. Sometimes they're right on. Sometimes they miss some things. And I think that it's kind of in the middle. And I'm looking forward to doing the breakdown. I just got the video downloaded. I'm going to start my breakdowns tomorrow on Patreon. So they'll start popping up tomorrow. If you like film breakdowns of the games, those are available over on Patreon, 49ers Cutback Patreon. Link is in the description if you want to check that out. Also, standalone videos. The Ant Hill Show is available. That was recorded on Monday morning. We talked Kendrick Bourne. We talked Colt McKivitz. So those things are available as well. But they've got to make sure that Trent Williams, Ben Bartch, Jake Brendel, Dominic Puni, and Colt McKivitz get a rapport and a chemistry together. I don't think anyone had a great game. I don't think anyone had a terrible game. I do think that Trent Williams struggled. I'm hoping a lot of it has to do with rust. But having the consistent left guard next to him is going to go a long way in kind of stabilizing this offensive line. He had Aaron Banks for the last couple years, and they worked really well together. Now him and Ben Bartch got to have the ability to work well together. And so I'm curious, how this thing works out. But hopefully Ben Bartch being day-to-day, Brock Purdy being day-to-day, they can kind of work in. Hopefully it's good news from Jauan Jennings as well. Once he gets a CT back that he's going to be able to go. Maybe it's, a bruise, something that he can work through and play. As long as it's nothing serious, these guys can sometimes tough out the pain. So that's just going to be things to monitor. You add Kendrick Bourne to the mix. He can kind of alleviate some of the pressure on Ricky Pearsall and Jauan Jennings. Give you a consistent target to go to on third down. Before there was third and Jauan, there was Kendrick Bourne who used to make those key catches on 3rd and 16 against the Rams. It was something that he did. And we know he's going to bring some fire, some juice, some energy. I think that's really good as well. Now, one thing I got to talk about before we, in the episode is I got to talk about the new contract for Colt McKivitz. The Colt McKivitz signs a 3-year, $45 million contract with $26+ million guaranteed. And, I had tweeted this right after the Fred Warner contract extension, which was the last of the 3 big contract extensions. George Kittle, Brock Purdy, Fred Warner. And I said Colt McKivitz needs to be next. And here's why I believe that. Colton McKivitz is an above-average right tackle. In a league that is devoid of extreme talent at tackle, he is a pretty solid right tackle in the NFL. Is he elite? No. But what he is he's become consistent. All you have to do is look at his first season starting in 2023, and then look at what he did in 2024. Colton McKivitz improved mightily. 2023, he gave up 10 sacks. Now, I'm just going to talk about pass protection for a second. He gave up 10 sacks. Last year in 2024, he gave up 1 sack. Yes, mobility of Brock Purdy does play into some of the sack numbers for the 49ers offensive line. However, Colton McKivitz has consistently improved. In fact, in this game, he was the best pass protector of the 49ers offensive line. That is something he's done. He worked on his body. He's in the best shape of his life. He's playing the most consistent of his life. And I think this is the right time. I know he's 29 years old, and offensive lineman, if you get over that 30 age, it gets a little bit dicey. But he's not a running back, right? He's not a guy that has a lot of tread off the tires. He's got some time left. But he also is a guy that plays. He lines up every single game and plays. He doesn't miss. That is a rare commodity to have an above average offensive tackle who plays every single week that's becoming consistent in both the pass blocking, which he was really good at, and run blocking, which he keeps getting better and better at. So I thought this was a good signing. The value was tremendous. When you think about what he could have got on the open market, this is a team-friendly deal. It's $15 million a year is the same thing Jalen Moore got. He was the backup offensive tackle for the 49ers to go to the Kansas City Chiefs. So Colton McKivitz definitely could have tested free agency and said, you know what, I could probably get $20 million out there because there's a value there, because Colton McKivitz is better than Mike McGlinchey was with San Francisco because he's more consistent pass blocking, and he's not as good as McGlinchey run blocking, but he becomes more and more effective all the time. And so that consistency is what the 49ers weigh all the time. All you have to do is look, Mike McGlinchey's an elite run blocker, but Colton McKivitz is a much better pass blocker and a decent run blocker. So now there's more effectiveness there, more balance. You look at Ben Barch. Aaron Banks was a really good pass blocker, and he could run block as well. But at times, he would struggle getting to the second level. Ben Barch was your best run blocking offensive lineman in this game. So you get an improvement, and it's just something that he can do. Now, he did a pretty good job pass blocking as well in this game, but that's what you're getting, more balance. And ultimately, that's what you're hoping you're going to get. Now, this is a long season. This is only a 1-week sample size. With McKivitz, it's a little bit easier to see. We've seen it for a couple years of him starting every single game. That's a lot of starts. But I thought that this was a good move by the 49ers. It stabilized the right tackle spot for the next 3 years. It kept Colton McKivitz and Dominic Puni together for this season and at least 2 more before they have to make a decision on Dominic Puni. But that was very important to keep that right side of the line together. It also insulated yourself in case Trent Williams, heaven forbid, ends up retiring. Well, then all you have to do is you draft a left tackle or you sign a left tackle. You don't have to find 2 different tackles, because that was going to be a situation you could run into. Next year, it could have been Trent Williams just decides to retire and Colton McKivitz moves on in free agency, and Spencer Burford gets offered money to go somewhere else the same way Jalen Moore did. And all of a sudden, you're looking around and you have no offensive tackles under contract, and you are in a world of hurt. Now you don't have to worry about that. At worst, you've got 1 right tackle ready to go, and you need to get a left tackle and a swing tackle. You find that left tackle in the draft or in free agency, and then you can get a swing tackle. There's always guys available. You could draft those guys in the 4th round and beyond. 49ers are proving it. Jalen Moore, Spencer Burford, 2 guys, 4th and 5th round picks who ended up being swing tackles for the San Francisco 49ers. So that is part of the reason I love the move to keep Colton McKivitz. I love keeping continuity on an offensive line, guys who are used to working together. Chris Foerster has invested heavily in Colton McKivitz. And remember, this isn't a first or draft pick. This was a John Benton, who is the Seattle Seahawks offensive line coach, draft pick. However, Foerster, he lit a fire under Colton McKivitz when he waived him after the 2020 season, or during the 2020 season. And he was on the 49ers practice squad. He eventually came up because of injury. Since then, he hasn't looked back, and he has developed into a very solid player. So good news for the 49ers with the contract extension. Good news with the Kendrick Bourne signing that's going to add to this football team. Now we wait and see. Will they go out and sign a tight end, a Ross Dwelly? Do they just elevate Braden Willis? Do maybe they look around another practice squad, find a guy like Robert Tonyan, who's on the Chiefs practice squad? Maybe they do that. So there are some things that can still happen. Corresponding roster moves are to come. We're going to watch to see what happens with George Kittle and the IR. And can Brock Purdy practice? Going to be one of the key things this week. So it wasn't great injury news. It wasn't terrible either, kind of in the middle, but it was good that the 49ers got a guy like Kendrick Bourne to come in. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening to audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, please give it a 5-star rating. This episode was brought to you by FanDuel. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.